Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the PG Show, where we talk about all things college football. And today we got to talk about week 3 and all the upcoming games there. We got to talk about some of those upsets in week 2. And then, of course, we got to talk about it. My Oklahoma Sooners are going to Lincoln, Nebraska for the first time since 2009. And we are excited to see just what this rivalry can bring this week. But before we do that, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. What game are you most excited to see going into week 3 of the college football season? Okay, so today I have Charlie Ship on with me. He is one of my coworkers and a huge Texas Tech fan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Glad to be on here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Well, we're just going to go ahead and dive into it a little bit, talking about some of those upsets that happened in week 2. And the first one that I want to touch on is the Texas A&M and Appalachian State game. So I don't know if you've watched a lot of my videos this year, but I have been really high on Appalachian State. I called them to beat North Carolina. They ended up coming short in that game, but I did call them to beat Texas A&M as well, and that was mainly because of who Appalachian State was bringing back and their starting quarterback from last year, Chase Bryce. And then also they're returning a lot of production in that running game and that passing game as well in terms of the wide receivers. And so they just had a lot of weapons there. And I thought, with a bunch of true freshmen on the defense for Texas A&M, like they're probably not going to be able to play to the level that we expect them to play at. And well, sure enough, that ended up happening. Appalachian State won 17-14, and quite frankly, I think shocked a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people expected for Appalachian State to hang in there. And I kind of reviewed this game a little bit earlier in the week, and if it wasn't for I think it was a 97-yard kickoff return by the Aggies, they potentially could have lost this game 17-7. So it could have been a lot worse than what it was. Their starting quarterback and Haynes King only threw for 97 yards, did not look good at all. Texas A&M's offensive line doesn't look good. Their defense looks like it's struggling, and that was their strong point last year. What did you think about this game? Because, Appalachian State, it seems like they're the team that you don't want to schedule in the out of conference.
The fact that Appalachian State went into Kyle Field and was able, in front of 100,000 people, was able to upset Texas A&M, hold possession of the ball pretty much the entire game was very impressive. I know Appalachian State has kind of a record. I mean, we all remember in 2006, Appalachian State upsetting Michigan, and this is their new thing. So I think they just outplayed A&M. A&M doesn't have much of an offense. I think they're struggling at the quarterback position a little bit. I think this is a little bit of a down slope for A&M until they start rising again. I don't think this is the end-all be-all for Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher is a person that builds programs, and he doesn't struggle with that. I mean, he did it at Florida State, even though Florida State was struggling. So a lot of people are coming for Jimbo, saying he's on the hot seat, but granted, they have to pay him $90 million if they want to fire him. So I think A&M is okay. I mean, it's a terrible upset. But, I mean, Appalachian State just totally outworked A&M and came to play on Saturday.
Yeah, so you brought up the buyout, and that's interesting because a tie over at Around the Table Sports brought this up the other day in the stream that we did with him, which was they fired Sumlin for about the same production they're getting out of Jimbo Fisher. In 50 games, Jimbo won 35, Kevin Sumlin won 36. Jimbo has 7 ranked wins, Sumlin had 9 ranked wins. Jimbo has 0 ranked road wins, Sumlin had 5. The only difference between the two is Jimbo lost to a G5 school and Kevin Sumlin did not. Additionally, Jimbo won at home against Bama, but someone can say, hey, I went on the road and beat Bama, and I didn't even beat Bama in a rebuilding year, what Bama would call a rebuilding year. He beat Bama in a year where, they thought they were pretty good. The only thing I think that Jimbo has over Sumlin in 5 years is 2 top 5 classes, one of those being the best of all time, which you can say, hey, like they paid for that class. And then they had 4 in the top 10. Sumlin only touted 2 top 10 classes in his entire reign at Texas A&M. And so I guess the question was, if this was Kevin Sumlin after losing to Appalachian State, like, would he still be there? You're giving Jimbo too much credit for what he did at Florida State. Like, he only won one national championship there. And Jameis Winston, like, in reality, like, we've seen him go to the NFL. He's not the quarterback that a lot of people thought he was going to be. Like, he was a good college quarterback, but that's really about it. So all he really has to show for in Florida State is one Heisman and one national championship game. So I don't know. Like, if this was Kevin Sumlin, do we have to hold Jimbo Fisher up to those standards, even though he has a higher buyout?
Well, I think Kevin Sumlin was kind of riding on the wave a little bit of Johnny Manziel, Mike Evans, and I don't think Jimbo's had that. Granted, both these guys, Kevin Sumlin and Jimbo, are high-class recruiters. We just saw A&M had the #1 recruiting class in the nation. Kevin Sumlin, like I said, Johnny Manziel, Heisman winner. So, I mean, depending on the circumstance, I don't know if we can possibly compare the two because Kevin Sumlin and Jimbo are a little bit in a different boat. I think it just comes all down to the donors. So I think they like Jimbo and where they're taking this program. There's also another polarized side that want to get Jimbo out for losing to Appalachian State. So I think we shouldn't throw the towel in too quick on Jimbo because, I mean, what is it, year 3 with him? Year 3?
Yeah, year 3.
Year 3. So I would say give it a little bit more time. I think they have a lot of faith in him, and he's building that program going in the right direction. So that's where I stand on it.
Yeah, so I guess one of the questions you really have to ask yourself, though, is how successful is Jimbo going to be this year? Because he did have the best recruiting class of all time last season. They're in there this year. Those true freshmen are playing. But are they going to want to stick around? And Josh Pate over at The Late Kick, which I think he'll be going live here soon. So after we're done, everybody go check that one out. He talked about how Jimbo Fisher is running an expired offense from 2014. They not only brought in one of the best defensive line classes that we've ever seen, but they brought in extreme talent throughout. I think they brought in, 2 5-star wide receivers and a 5-star quarterback. The question is, are these true freshmen going to want to stay through a season where, I mean, Texas A&M might be lucky to be in the same position as Texas last year, because you have to go on the road, or not on the road this year, but this week you play Miami at home with Mario Cristobal and Tyler Van Dyke, who, quite frankly, Tyler Van Dyke might be a first-round draft pick this year. Additionally, you have to play a top 10 Arkansas team at home. However, Arkansas is probably one of the top 3. Some people might argue to be one of the top 2 SEC teams. You have to go to Mississippi State. A lot of people are counting them out in that game. You have to go to Tuscaloosa, and I have no doubt in my mind they're going to get just manhandled in that game. You've got South Carolina. I'm high on them. A lot of people aren't, so you probably win that one. Like, up and down the schedule outside of UMass with all the SEC teams, I don't see very many wins for Texas A&M. I see them losing to Miami, Arkansas, Alabama, and at least Ole Miss and Florida. That they could end this game. They could end this season with 7 losses. Easy. It's possible. And the question is, does this true freshman class stick around?
Well, with the transfer portal, you just never know. It's totally shaken up the whole college football scene. I know with A&M, I know that I guess it's an open seat for whoever wants to take the QB1. We'll just have to see when they go against Miami this week. Another talk is about Jimbo. Possibly, he's the one calling the plays. He's the OC. So he may just have to, eat his pride and possibly hand it off to the actual offensive coordinator just to see if that flows a little better. But the number one thing with A&M is their QB situation. I mean, Mon was a good QB, but was he that good? They really haven't had a standout quarterback. I mean, they've had Kyler Murray, Kyle Allen, who've been in the NFL, who've done great, but they just didn't fit in with that program. So I think depending on how Miami goes, they should figure out the quarterback situation with Max Johnson or Haynes King or even the 5-star freshman that they're possibly get a red shirt. So a lot of uncertainties with Texas A&M going forward in the season.
Okay. All right, let's end it there, and let's move on to another upset that I thought was pretty big, and it was the Texas Tech versus Houston game. And here's why. This was supposed to be the year that Dana Holgorsen really put it together down there at Houston. And you really struggled against UTSA, a game that most years you would think, hey, you got that, you're going to win. And then you go and you lose to Texas Tech, which Texas Tech looks really good, especially with Donovan Smith at quarterback. He did throw 3 interceptions that game, which is kind of concerning, especially going into Big 12 play. Going to have to be playing Baylor and Oklahoma, where you expect them to have better secondaries. What were your thoughts on this one? Because I just shocked that a Dana Holgorsen team lost this early in the season.
Well, I mean, it's a hard place to go into the Jones and win at, and I don't think Houston was possibly ready for that. And Donovan Smith, I personally thought he should have started from the get-go. It's real tragic what happened to Shuck, but I think he came out there. He's a good leader. Houston, I would say, is a really good ball program. I wouldn't throw in the towel on them yet. But it was just, we went 2 overtimes, and our offense looked really well. I'm really a little skeptical on our defense, which is really hard to recruit, defensive players out to Lubbock. So the next test will be NC State, of course. But, Houston, I thought that was a great game. I think it's the right step in the right direction, kind of with Texas and Bama. But I like what Donovan Smith's doing. I think we look good in the pass game, good in the run game with Sirajic Thompson and our other running backs. So, it was a complete mind blower, and Vegas, called it well with the spread and everything. So, looking forward to the Texas Tech Raiders taking on NC State next week.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that NC State game here in just a little bit. But Texas Tech's schedule is pretty interesting because you got to go play two top 25 teams in NC State and Texas. Then you got to go to Kansas State, where I believe at that point they're going to be a top 25 team. Then you got to play a top 10 team in Oklahoma State. Like, their schedule looks brutal, especially on the front end. The back half might get a little easier. You still have to play Baylor and Oklahoma, but you got Iowa State, Kansas, TCU, and West Virginia. So we'll see where the Red Raiders can end up this year. I did see something interesting floating around on Twitter, and I don't know if you've seen it, but their players' cafeteria looks incredible. I don't know if you've seen it, but it looks awesome, and OU needs to get it. So
yeah, no, that's we got that, I believe, in like 2019. I guess we got some more funding or whatever, but yeah, no, it's incredible. It's cool. Good place for them. Get them gains.
Yeah, no, it looks good. I've seen the OU one where, it's just a little spot in the, it's like in the training center. But I wish they had something like that. That would just be awesome. It's definitely a good recruiting advantage when you say, hey, you can come here. And I showed like they were making steaks and all this other stuff. So looks awesome. But let's go ahead and let's move on to just the last upset that I really want to talk about. And it's actually a pretty important one. And we're not going to talk about Notre Dame, Marshall. It's going to be Baylor and BYU. So Baylor last year won the Big 12. They had a lot of momentum going into this season. And you heard a lot of talk because Dave Aranda named Blake Shapen the starting quarterback out there pretty early. Mm-hmm. And BYU has been a really competitive, independent team for a long, long time. BYU at home, gets the upset win against Baylor. And now all of a sudden Baylor's playing from behind and now potentially is looking from the outside going into the college football playoffs, which I felt like if they were able to put it together on offense this year, they probably had a pretty good shot at. And it looked like Blake Shapen might have got them going in the right direction until I started watching this game. And then the offense was just terrible on both sides. But the interesting thing here is, with this win for BYU over Baylor, they are now setting themselves up in prime position to make a college football playoff run. And here's what I mean by that. They have to go play number 25 Oregon this weekend. Then you get a pretty easy schedule, play Wyoming and Utah State, and then you have to go to Notre Dame. Even if Notre Dame is only a 7-5 team this year, to look at a BYU team and go, oh, you went to Notre Dame and won that. That's pretty impressive. Additionally, they're going to come back home and play a top 10 Arkansas team. Going to be another really tough matchup, and it'd be really bad if Arkansas was on the receiving end of another group of 5 or independent loss again, and that team makes it to the playoffs. And then after that, it's pretty much all smooth sailing for them. Liberty, East Carolina, Boise State, Utah Tech, at Stanford. Am I crazy to think that this BYU team could start to scratch the surface of the college football playoffs this year if they win out and go undefeated?
I think that's a little premature. I honestly think it's really hard to go into BYU Stadium and win. I mean, if you see in the past, Texas had such a trouble beating BYU back in the day, going to their place with the elevation, the student section. And I've been a person that's been really high on Baylor's football program. I think Baylor has not been underachieving. I think they've overachieved given, everything that's happened in the past with them. They got a great coach there. They're gritty. They kind of remind me of the TCU back in, 2009, 2010. Baylor is a good football program, and I think it was a little bit of a culture shock to go up to BYU with all the, the elevation, kind of out of McLean Stadium, and go in there and think they were going to win it, and they didn't. So I don't think BYU is by any means an easy win ever. I think it might be a little hard for them to go into Notre Dame, depending on, even though Notre Dame just came off a loss, but for them to go into Notre Dame, I think that's going to be their ultimate test. If they can beat Notre Dame and have wins going up to that game and beat them, then possibly they're going to be in the top, 8 or top 8 teams. So I don't know. BYU is always a gritty team, and we can't count them out. I don't know, saying them that they're a playoff team, that might be a little premature. But no, good football program all around.
Yeah, no, John Nakata also said it down below. BYU's strength of schedule isn't going to be enough for a 4-team. They'd for sure make a 12-team. And again, I would really argue that by looking at their schedule, right? I know this Oregon team got beat down, but I would expect this Oregon team to come back and potentially win the Pac-12 this year. And not only that, having to go to Notre Dame is additionally tough. And then if they get the credibility of beating an Arkansas team who might only lose 1 or 2 games this year, I don't know. I feel like that puts them in prime position because you still have to play at Boise State. And for some reason, it always seems like the college football higher ups are always higher on Boise State. They always rank them pretty high if they're pretty good throughout the end of the season. And then you got to go to at Stanford. So you're having to play another Power 5 team. They might not be the best Power 5 team, but you can say, hey, we put up not 1, not 2, but 3 Power 5 wins. And then a pretty good independent win against Notre Dame. So even though it might not be Notre Dame's year,
even if they go 2 out of 3, I mean, I don't think they're a college football top 4 to go to the championship. But I think, a good year for BYU is in the top 10. That's where I stand on it.
Yep. All right. I want to talk about this comment right here. Texas A&M needs to get a top-notch quarterback, possibly Hudson Card. Kevin Sumlin and Jimbo Fisher are the same. Big recruiting with no results. Defensive coordinator have caught up with you. And I want to talk about this because we did talk about how Jimbo is not adapting and he's not moving. And their quarterback situation is pretty interesting because they right now, I think earlier in the week announced that Max Johnson and Haynes King are, 50-50 in those first string snaps. But then you've also got that 5-star sitting back there, and I can't think of his name for the life of me. So going into next season, do they need to potentially look in the transfer portal for a guy like Hudson Card, or do they need to roll with it's Connor Weigman is their 5-star quarterback, or potentially Max Johnson or whoever else is back there?
Well, I'll be completely honest with you. I don't think there's a chance in this world that Hudson Card goes to Texas A&M. He is from Austin. He went to Lake Travis High School, I believe. I'm not sure if he is a state championship, but that kid from Austin that goes to UT, I don't think there's a chance that he goes to Texas A&M. Not possibly a bad fit. Hudson Card is a good backup, and he's going to be the starter for the next couple of weeks. But I don't think he's going to go to Texas A&M. I always wanted low-key for Hudson Card to go to Texas Tech. I don't know if that's feasible, but I think Hudson Card would pick Texas Tech over Texas A&M. But yeah, no, with the Aggies, I think they have a quarterback situation on their hands like they've always kind of had in the past. So they just got to nail that down. I think they have a really good defense. Really good D line. It's their offense. They also have some good receivers. Anaya Smith, some other receivers as well. And I don't know. I don't think we should count out the Aggies going forward. I don't think they'll go to the playoffs, but this Miami game will, I hope, possibly dictate their future going forward in the season.
All right. Well, I'm just really curious to hear your takes. So let's go ahead and just jump into week 3. Let's just go ahead and start previewing some of these games, and we'll just start off with that Miami versus Texas A&M game because we've been talking about it. So I've talked about it. I think Miami wins this game. I personally don't think it's close. I think Tyler Van Dyke probably throws for 300 yards. I think Mario Cristobal gets this team ready to play. He did it against Ohio State last year with Oregon, and I don't think the talent between those two teams is actually too far off. So I think he can do it again here, which with the Texas A&M team that is just inexperienced, especially with a top 15 team in Miami, and they've got a lot of momentum. And I think there's an underlying headline here that we really need to talk about. Miami and Texas A&M are in some huge recruiting battles with each other right now. One for 5-star wide receiver Hakeem Williams, and for Texas A&M to go in there and potentially drop this game, I think it's definitely going to hurt them. It's going to be pretty bad. Like it's going to hurt them on the recruiting trail, and their 2023 recruiting class is not good right now as it sits. So go ahead and just tell us, what do you think about this game?
Well, I got a question for you. How do you think Miami's going to come in to the number 1 college football atmosphere in the nation, in my opinion? I mean, I haven't been to the Ohio States or the Bamas or anything. How do you think they're going to adjust to 105,000 people at Kyle Field after a upsetting, humiliating loss against Appalachian State?
Experience. Experience goes a long way. And Tyler Van Dyke has been around. He knows what he's doing. And again, like, I wonder if, because that Appalachian State game was close. So if Texas A&M gets down 14-0 early or 21-0 early, what's that like? How are these players going to react? How are these true freshmen going to react? Because I understand what you're saying about the environment, but I think we're glossing over the point that Texas A&M is starting true freshmen all up and down the board on the offense and the defense. And with that inexperience versus going up against an experienced team, I'm going to take the experienced team all day long, even though they might be at home with that atmosphere.
Well, it's going to be an uphill battle for sure if Miami puts up 14 points in the half and Texas A&M with no offense, and they're shaky on offense. Everyone knows that. I think that's a totally different game. If A&M comes out of the gates and has firing all cylinders with their offense and their defense is good, they could have a really good game against Miami and possibly win that. But it all comes down to their quarterback situation, because I feel like in that program, they don't know. They don't know going forward who's going to be their guy to lead that team to the 10-2 season that A&M's been dying for in the past, what was it, 2 years, maybe 3 years, or I know they were number 5 in the nation, but Miami's not going to be an easy one. Appalachian State, I know a lot of Aggies were real skeptical on that. But it all comes down to, is A&M's offense going to show up?
Well, and they haven't so far this season. And I know people are going to point to that Sam Houston State, go, well, we won 31-0. Yeah, against Sam Houston State, you're an SEC team. You probably should have put 60 up on them, at least.
Hey, they did win a national championship.
Yeah, it's not the same. So currently, Texas A&M's favored by 6. Obviously, I think Miami's going to go in there and win that game. So, however, the over/under for this game is only 44.5. So, does not look like the bettors think that Texas A&M or Vegas thinks that Texas A&M is going to put up a lot of points. Additionally, I want to point this out. And I know Miami, I know it's too early to tell because nobody's really played anybody yet, but Miami's only allowing 286 yards on offense. Texas A&M's only putting up 338. Now, mind you, Miami's putting up 518. That's going to be a tremendous swing. And I just don't think you figure out all of your offensive struggles in 1 week, especially coming up from an upset.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, no.
All right, let's go ahead and let's move into the next one. So this is another one that you picked. You like the Mississippi State versus LSU game. Man, I feel like Brian Kelly needs this one. And the line is kind of favoring Mississippi State here at 2.5. So they're not even giving them a field goal yet. So Vegas thinks that this one's going to be a close one. Statistically, they're kind of the same. I'm not too high on Jaden Daniels right now for LSU. I don't think he was exactly what they were expecting, but I'm not sure that he was too big of an upgrade from Max Johnson, or if anyway. So what do you think about this game? Who do you think is going to pull this one out?
You know, Mississippi State is one of those schools. They're kind of like the K-State of the SEC. They could go out and take a win from anyone. And so I think with Mike Leach, you know, he's always pretty solid on offense, pretty solid on defense. They could take this game if they wanted to. Granted, LSU has underperformed in the past 10 years other than their national championship. But sometimes LSU, you see when they play Bama sometimes, is that they show up to play and they look like a top 4 team. Based on their performance against Florida State, others might think otherwise. But I think it's going to be a closer game than most people think. I'm going to take Mississippi State in this just because I don't think they're intimidated by LSU. LSU's a little low on confidence. The Brian Kelly situation, I just feel like the whole LSU fan base just is thrown in the towel on Brian Kelly. I don't know what it is. It seems like he's a little passive. I don't know, but I don't think LSU has that confidence and faith. And they've had a quarterback situation other than Joe Burrow. They've never had their solid last quarterbacks of the past 15 years is Jamarcus Russell and Joe Burrow. And then some people throw in Zach Mettenberger, who I thought was a very average quarterback. But I think, again, with the quarterback situation, I don't think LSU can go in there and have a high-performing offense against Mississippi State, who's usually a good defensive school.
Yeah, so I want to talk about this one for a second. And you know what? Put me on the big screen. LSU fans, here's the deal. Y'all need to simmer down on Brian Kelly. And here's why. It's his first year. The man was at Notre Dame and I felt like was recruiting really well out there and was bringing in pretty good talent to be at Notre Dame, not a Power 5 school. Expect him to come in the first year and have problems, have a couple hiccups, especially with this schedule. I'm walking up and down the schedule, right? Maybe he goes and wins the next 3 straight games. You guys are looking at a 4-1 before you guys have to go into just a brutal schedule. Tennessee at home, at Florida, Ole Miss at home, Alabama at home, at Arkansas. You get a break at Reno, you get UAB at home, but then you got to go to A&M. You got to go to Aggie Field. Like, okay, if you guys only win 6 games this year, I think that's okay. That is okay because Brian Kelly is going to be able to come in and recruit at an elite level, probably way better than he was at Notre Dame. If you can get what he got at Notre Dame here at LSU, I think you're happy with that. So I think the LSU fans need to calm down here. They don't need to get frustrated with Brian Kelly in his first year. Listen, you played a Florida State team with Mike Norvell. I think they're coming into their 3rd or 4th year. They're finally coming around. It looks like they're turning the corner. I think Florida State is probably going to go win 7 or 8 games this year in the ACC. So you probably lost to a pretty good up-and-coming Florida State team. I think everybody just needs to calm down a little bit. Calm down a little bit.
Well, if you think about it, they were so quick to throw in the towel on Les Miles and Coach Ogeron, and those guys were, the heart and soul of Louisiana, and then you got this northerner coming from Notre Dame. So the LSU people just kind of need to be transparent and let him do his thing and, build a football program. That's what he was brought to do at LSU, and he did that at Notre Dame. And I mean, maybe he wasn't the best coach in Notre Dame's history, but he's a good coach. He knows what he's doing. But LSU fans need to just chill out a little bit with throwing in the towel on their head coaches like they did to Les Miles and Coach O. That's just my.
Yeah, I know you guys are in the SEC. You guys expect to be just this elite program year in and year out, and that's okay. But remember, you don't have Nick Saban. And it's hard to do that if you don't have Nick Saban on your sideline.
Mm-hmm.
So LSU fans have just got to take a step back, and they've got to give their coach at least 4 years to be able to get in there. Because this is the other thing. Brian Kelly doesn't even have his own guys yet. He had to go into the transfer portal to get guys. So this is a common thing that I talk about with coaches across the board. You've got to give coaches time to bring in their own guys, bring in their own culture. It's hard to work with somebody else's culture. And, right now you see guys like BV at OU and some of the places turning around, but I mean, that's kind of that's a little different because we shipped a bunch of guys out this year throughout the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
LSU did that, but again, I think he needs to be able to get his own recruiting class in. He needs to have, 3 or 4 years, get in a cycle. LSU will be fine. What is it? Their past 3 head coaches have won a national championship at LSU. Is that what it is?
Yep.
So let's give Brian Kelly a little bit of time here. There's going to be lots of good quarterbacks entering the transfer portal. I think Ohio State's just got a huge room of them, and that's where you guys got your last one. So chill out a little bit. I do think LSU wins this one. I think it's a close one, but I'm taking Brian Kelly here. So let's move into your next pick, Texas Tech versus NC State. I'm not even going to say anything. I'm just going to go ahead and let you dive into this one.
Texas Tech's offense is firing on all cylinders. I didn't think NC State looked that impressive against East Carolina. I think, Texas Tech has a little bit of swag, and I'm not trying to be a little biased. It would be nice for Texas Tech to beat NC State. We get into the rankings, and we play Texas that next week after that, and we get into the rankings, so we look a little bit better against Texas. But I mean, it's up in the air. It just depends on which team decides to show up. I'm not really familiar with how good NC State's defense is. I know our defense kind of struggles a little bit, but I mean, if our offense shows up, I don't see why we can't take this game. I do think we can take this game. Vegas has maybe, a different idea what we can do, but it's up in the air, and I think we're going to show up with a little bit of the swag we have.
Yeah, so personally, if I was a betting man, I would take the over on this game. They have the over-under set at 56. And with Donovan Smith on one side of the ball, as long as he's not throwing 3 interceptions in a game, and Devin Leary on the other side, I would expect it to be a fireworks show. Now, they are favoring NC State by 10.5 in this game. But, I'm so torn on this because I want Texas Tech to win. I want them to be good because it makes OU look good when we play them. But my heart tells me, hey, don't go against East State because Devin Leary has already thrown for 5 touchdowns, only has 1 interception on the year. Donovan Smith has shown us that he's going to make mistakes. And so the NC State defense, they're only allowing 266 yards a game. I mean, now they did play East Carolina.
I don't disagree with that. And, we did beat Houston. Houston did look a little shaky against UTSA. But I don't see why we can't just go in there and possibly win us a ball game.
No, and you're totally valid. And this is why I'm having such a hard time with this game. Their first game of the season at Eastern Carolina, they only won 21-20. At East Carolina. And I don't consider East Carolina to be a very good school. And so I look at it and go, okay, you're going to have to come play an explosive Texas Tech offense. I just don't know where you go with that game. I don't know if I can call this one yet because I don't know. I just don't know which way to land. Their defense, I don't think, has proven to play anybody tough and to shut them down. And Texas Tech is going to go out there. Texas Tech's going to go out there and at least score 24 points. And so I guess the question is, can NC State score more than 24?
I'm not really familiar with NC State's offense. I know that they didn't look, incredibly well against Eastern Carolina. I mean, their offense is going to show up to play for sure because they're at home and also because Texas Tech lacks. I mean, we've seen it in the past. They've lacked defense. So, I mean, this is going to be a really interesting game to say the least. and I hope my Red Raiders can go out there and get us a win. But yeah, no, it's a really uneasy game, and I'm not sure if I can put my finger on it, but it's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, so to give you just a little bit more insight to this one. So Devin Leary, who's our starting quarterback, he's a junior. So I would expect him to probably go to the draft this year. Last year, he threw for 3,433 yards, 35 touchdowns, and only 5 interceptions. And remember, that NC State team was pretty good last year. And I believe they have a pretty good offensive line, too. So he can sit back in the pocket and definitely do whatever he wants to. So I think that's probably going to be the only thing that kills Texas Tech is, can you provide a little bit of pressure to Devin Leary and make him uncomfortable? I think if you can get him in some uncomfortable situations, Texas Tech can pull this one out.
I agree, 100%.
Okay, so let's talk about the first game. I like this one, everybody, by the way. But let's talk about the first game tomorrow at 6:30, and it's Florida State at Louisville. And the Seminoles are 2-0. They had a bye week last week. Jordan Travis looks like I wouldn't say a great quarterback, but he looks like a good quarterback. Like, it looks like he's serviceable, and he can go out there. He can make the passes. He can read the defense. He knows what to go out there and do. Additionally, you've got 3 running backs that can get you 100 yards in any game. Their receiving core looks good. They're putting up 515 yards total offense right now. Their defense is playing really well. They came out, they beat LSU. They're high off that game. Louisville, outside of their quarterback and Malik Cunningham, I don't think there's a whole lot going for them. The line is only at 2.5. Man, I would take the over on this. Or I would take the over on the spread. But what do you think about this one?
Well, I mean, Louisville is always going to be. I mean, if you see, they got Teddy Bridgewater, Lamar Jackson, and the quarterback they have now, I can't think of his name. They're always going to be an offensive team that's going to drive the ball and pass the ball. They're going to have a fast quarterback. It's going to run around in the pocket. I would take the over as well. What did you say the over was?
So the line is set at 2.5, but the over under is 57.
Yeah, no, I would take the over on that. No, and I mean Florida State. It's going to be a close game. I think. I mean Florida State. We talked about it. LSU. They came in and beat LSU in Louisiana at the Superdome. So it just depends. I mean, if Florida State can play like they did against LSU, I think that they're going to win. But if Louisville does what they do with their offense, I don't see why they can't take a win. So that's also another intriguing game. I mean, the spreads this week are just real tricky. Hard to make a pick on this. So we'll just have to see where this goes.
Yeah. So Florida State's been on a kind of a hot streak. Ending last season, they beat Miami. They beat Boston College. They did lose to Florida by 3, and then they come into 2022 on another hot start, 2-0. I don't know how to say the team that they beat the first week, so I'm not going to try to attempt it. But beating LSU is a big one, especially I know they say it was a neutral site game, but heaven forbids they played that one in New Orleans. Like, it was pretty much a home game for LSU. So I'm just going to say you beat LSU at home. You have to go to Louisville on the road. You come back, you play Boston College. Then you have to play Wake Forest at home if you can shut their offense down. I think Florida State has a really good shot at winning 7 or 8 games this year. They've got a lot of potential. I'm picking Florida State to win this one. Florida State's got it all the way. The next game that we have to talk about is BYU at Oregon. And I know I talked to Lynx earlier about how BYU could be a playoff team this year if they went out, going to Eugene and beating Oregon, who could potentially be the Pac-12 champion. It's on Fox. BYU gets an opportunity to show their stuff in the middle of the day, right after Oklahoma and Nebraska play. BYU's offense, but their defense is looking really good. Not sure what to think about Oregon. You are playing Bo Nix, and, Bo Nix is prone to turnovers. We saw that in the Georgia game. What do you think about this one? The line's set at 3.5 in Oregon's favor, and the over-under's at 58.5.
Well, Georgia came in there and hit Oregon in the mouth, and I could possibly see that Oregon is a little mad about that. They're not, they're a little pissed off about it. So, I mean, BYU, they came in and beat Baylor last week. So it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be a back-and-forth game. I'm going to take I'm going to take BYU on this. I think Oregon goes through those periods when they're really, really good, and they're also not so good. So I'm going to take BYU on this at 3.5.
I 100% agree with you. They are 100% going to win that game. I don't think Oregon's really got that much of a shot. I think BYU's defense is too good, and they get the job done. So, all right. Next up, let's talk a little bit of Kansas at Houston. So I'm excited to talk Kansas because they're 2-0. They haven't done this in a while, and they seem like to be clicking and firing on all cylinders on offense. I want to see them ranked in the top 25. You have to play a Houston team that just lost to Texas Tech. I think Houston tried to schedule a ton of easy games, and it didn't work out in their favor this year. Seems like everybody's picking it up. First off, what are your thoughts on Kansas? And then give us your pick on this game.
I don't know how I feel about Kansas. I feel like they've been a little bit of the rejects in the past. But everyone is really, really, loves to talk, make jokes about Kansas and everything. They beat Texas last year. They've beaten, no offense, OU, what was it, in the Baker era?
I don't think we've lost to Kansas since, I want to say the early 2009, 2010 maybe.
But Kansas playing Houston. Houston does not look as promising as people thought. They're not ranked anymore. And, I'm going to take Houston in this just because, Kansas did beat West Virginia, but Houston is a good football program. And they can go out there and, they're a small market program, and they can go out there and win games. So I'm going to take Houston on this.
Going to take Houston. Okay, you know what? I'm going to pick Kansas just to go against you. But John here says, ha, 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 ha. Kansas hasn't beat OU in a long old time.
Well, what was the drama game with Baker in Kansas?
Oh, that was the year that Baker grabbed his crotch because the Kansas players didn't shake his hands at halftime. No, it wasn't at halftime. It was at the beginning of the game. Sorry, it was at the beginning of the game.
Why am I thinking this did not just come from anywhere, nor like out of the
no?
Why am I thinking
you're thinking about it from last year because last year OU played Kansas really close. Remember that the first half, that first quarter, Kansas pretty much held the ball the entire first quarter before we got the ball back, and then we couldn't score.
For some reason, I thought you guys lost that game.
No, we did not lose that game. John says last loss versus Kansas was in 1997. That was the year I was born. Damn.
Okay.
Man, I'm old. That's 25 years ago.
Same. I was born that year too.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, no. So line set at -9 in Houston's favor. Over unders at 58.5. So they definitely expect some fireworks to be going here. I don't know. I'm going to take Kansas to win this game. I think their offense is really good. I say really good. It's not really good, but I think it's good for Big 12 standards. I think they're going to be able to sling the ball around. Jalen Daniels has been able to prove that. I think he's throwing for 83.3% of his passes right now, which I think is just pretty dang good. So, and they did beat West Virginia last week, and I thought West Virginia was a decent team with JT Daniels at the helm. Now, they also have Devin Neal at running back, and Devin Neal looks like a dude. I would expect him to probably transfer out this season, maybe go get an opportunity somewhere else. So, okay, next game up, and I know we talked about this one before we hopped on, and it is Toledo at Ohio State. And I know you thought I was a little crazy, but I'm just going to go ahead and give it up to everybody. If Ohio State's not careful, they could probably lose this one to Toledo. I think Toledo's got a pretty good defense here, and I think they can potentially shut down Ohio State's offense a little bit with that too high safety look that CJ Stroud really struggles with. So give us a little bit of insight this one.
I'm going to stop you there. When has Toledo been relevant in the past 20 years?
It's not that they have to be relevant. It's what are they doing for me now? And right now, they have a good defense. They're only allowing 183 yards a game. And we all know that Justin Fields struggles with that too high safety look. So go out there, give them that look all game, try to shut down the passing game, and focus on the run game.
What
Hope
do
that
you
your
mean by
defensive
too
line can
high
stop it.
safety look? That's the normal look of any cover 2, cover 4 defense.
And that's what he struggles with. We saw that in the Notre Dame game.
So he
That's
struggles with every time he goes out there?
pretty much.
I just don't see it. I don't see Toledo possibly going in there and upsetting Ohio State. Ohio State has been a top performing college football program that they could be asleep and still beat Toledo. So I just don't. I think Toledo is more relevant than Kansas. I just haven't seen. I mean, Toledo was a fun team to play in NCAA college football in the GameCube, but I just don't see. I don't see how the too high safety look, which is a normal look on pretty much every play, unless you're running a man defense, is how CJ Stroud's going to struggle with that. So I just don't see it.
I'm not saying Toledo's going to win. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying Ohio State might have a game on their hands if they're not careful, because Toledo's got a pretty good defense. And the other thing is, too, Ohio State's offense struggled last week to score a little bit in that first quarter. It took them a while to kind of get going. And if they happen to do that again, you could get yourself in a hole. And I'm not sure if Jackson Smith and Jigba and Julian Fleming are playing in this game. And so I think that's potentially going to be an issue for the Ohio State Buckeyes. But we don't have to hang on this one too much.
We can just label your take as a hot take. I just don't see it. Even with Notre Dame losing to Marshall, I mean, Ohio State winning in Notre Dame Stadium, that is not an easy place to go to. An environment is a lot, I think. So I in my personal opinion, I just don't see it, and we'll label this as a hot take from you.
Hey, Ohio State did not go to Notre Dame Stadium. Notre Dame came to the Shoe.
Oh, that's
right. Ohio State. Yes, I don't know. It looks like this Ohio State team is in a little bit of a funk. It looks like they expected to be able to come out and just blow the doors off. Looks like that Notre Dame game put them into funk. So I'm not saying they're going to lose. I'm just saying they better be careful, because this Toledo team, I think, could cause them some problems that they don't want to be in.
I think a very liable argument here is if Toledo is going to cover at plus 27.5.
All right. Well,
that's Rob. That's my take.
Hey, you know what? I'm going to take Toledo cover this game just so that
that's not a hot take. That's a liable take.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and talk about it. The one that everybody's here to listen to, OU versus Nebraska. So we saw the game last year, 50-year anniversary of the game, whatever you want to call it. Sooners are coming in with a new head coach in Brent Venables. The Cornhuskers are coming in at 1-2, firing Scott Frost. Finally, thank God. They should have did it last season during the offseason. I don't know why they didn't wait 2 more weeks to wait and save the $7.5 million. I don't know if potentially beating OU or getting Malachi Coleman is worth that, but I guess it is to them, because they're paying $15 million to get rid of him. And I think for Nebraska, that's either that's a flex to show that they got money, or I don't know what it is. But anyways, but thank God he's gone. Nebraska can potentially come back to relevance, but all of y'all that are calling for Urban Meyer to come out to Nebraska, y'all don't want that. So shut up, just stop it. But
you know who wants to take that job, and I think they're going to take him.
Matt Campbell or Gary Patterson. That's I think the best hire.
Gary Patterson needs that job.
I think it would be. The thing is, though, and here's the problem with Nebraska. You have to get somebody that is not only a good coach, but they have to be able to recruit all of those states around you at a really high level, which is really hard to do because you have Oklahoma and Ohio State out there doing the same thing. And I don't know. I just don't know who fits best. I mean, Matt Campbell has obviously shown us that he's been able to bring programs up from the ashes in Iowa State, but I don't know, like you're in the Big Ten. It's going to be really hard, I think, to recruit over schools like Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State. I know someone's down here saying Mark Stoops. Listen, Mark Stoops is not leaving that Kentucky job. that is probably one of the safest jobs in college football right now because they are a basketball school. And if you can go out there and win 8 to 10 games a year, they don't that I mean, they're fine. That's good for them. They just want to go to a bowl game. They're not going to he's not going to Kentucky. That's probably not going to
I
happen.
would consider that a downgrade, honestly.
No, because here's my thing. You bring Nebraska back to relevance and you can get any job you want outside of maybe Alabama and a couple other schools. You can get pretty much any job you want.
Kentucky is a performing school in the SEC, and you think the Kentucky coach would leave to go to Nebraska, who is a low-performing school in the past 5 years?
No, I said he wouldn't leave.
Yes, okay, no, I don't think he would leave, but Gary Patterson built up TCU's program, won a Rose Bowl, won the Big 12, beat Texas, I believe, what was it, 4 out of 7 years, I think? I could be wrong on that, don't quote me, but he's an analyst for the University of Texas. He's working under Sarkisian, who's an offensive mind. I honestly think the first candidate for this job is going to be Gary Patterson.
Yeah, John Nakata said it best here. Kentucky is a school where all you have to do is beat Tennessee and Florida every 3 years and your job's secure. Why would he leave? He's not going to leave. So if you were wondering where I got that, one of the guys in the chat said Mark Stoops. So that's why I brought up Mark Stoops leaving. I think your best bet's to go out there and get Matt Campbell because you could pay him a lot more than what Iowa State's going to be able to pay him. And Matt Campbell knows how to develop, and Matt Campbell does know how to recruit. For a smaller school. He's done it for Iowa State. He develops players. So we'll see what Nebraska does. But in this game specifically, man, you're playing for your intern head coach. Scott Frost is gone. Renewed energy in that locker room. Definitely a renewed energy with the fans. Do you think Nebraska has a shot in this game? Or do you think if OU comes out, puts them up 21-0 in the first quarter, it's a gut punch to Nebraska and they just don't come back from it?
Oh, I think it's going to be a gut punch, but then again, this is a low-key rivalry. Would you say, being an OU fan?
Yep.
It's kind of the same if Texas was playing Nebraska. I mean, when was that game? Back in 2008, Colt McCoy, whatever. But regardless of the fact, I mean, Oklahoma and Nebraska have a historical of playing each other. So, I mean, there might be a fire under Nebraska that they just want to go out there and, they don't care anymore. But also, I could see them not having any confidence playing under anyone right now. So I think OU's going to cover here. I think OU's very consistent ball club for the most part, I would say. I don't want to rag on it too much. But, I think OU comes out there and plays their game and wins this game for sure.
Yeah, so, Mickey Joseph, I think, is going to have Nebraska ready to play, and I think these kids are going to want to play and run through a brick wall. I think the biggest concerns for Nebraska is their defense, right? That defense last year and then the years previous when they've been in those one-score games, that has been their bread and butter. That's what's kept that team together. And now all of a sudden, it seems like that's the part that's falling apart and their offense is coming together. But we've seen that plenty of times at Oklahoma. You cannot just have a good offense and go out there and win against really good teams consistently. And I'm picking OU to win this, obviously. The line is set at -11. And I want to say, hey, OU's going to come out there and probably win by 21 or 24. But it's also really hard to say that because there's a part of me that thinks that this could be a trap game for OU. Because, again, we've seen it plenty of times. Like, when OU fired Mike Stoops after the Texas game and when we played TCU, Ruffin McNeil, right? Like, that defense at OU looked really good in that game. Now, they didn't look good the rest of the season, but they looked really good in that game. So sometimes when you fire your head coach, you got an interim head coach coming in, like, it's just, I don't know, like that game can be a really tough game for the opponent that you have to go play. And it just so happens that it is, the OU Nebraska game that happens at. So I do think that if it wasn't OU, they probably wouldn't have fired Frost until probably October 1st.
Yeah, I agree because what does Nebraska have to lose? They're going to play OU. I just think, it's just two sides of the aisle is that they don't have confidence or they just have nothing to lose. So I don't see this is going to be a problem for OU at all.
Yeah, and the big thing here for OU is you're getting Wanye Morris back on the offensive line. You're getting potentially Nick Anderson back at the wide receiver. I know Venables said it was going to just depend on if he had any setbacks throughout the week. So your offensive line is going to see a lot of shifting this week, right? Everybody's going to go back to the positions that, they play. Wanye, I've said it. I don't think one guy makes it all that big of a difference, but when guys are having to play positions on the offensive line that they're not normally used to playing on different sides, sometimes that does affect them because sometimes they play better on one side than the other. So who knows? Maybe the offensive line gets better. Dylan Gabriel's out able to sit in the pocket a little bit more, throw some passes to Farouk or Weiss or Mims, and you see this game get out of hand quickly. And maybe we can even establish the running game with Gray a little bit. This is where I'm curious to see if Gray can really be a first, second, and third down back for OU. Because I think that's the one thing that we've needed to see out of Eric Gray. And we've seen it a little bit over the first two games. But I want to see, hey, are you going to be able to do it against some real talent? Because even though Nebraska hasn't played well, they still have talent. They're still a Big Ten team. And, they would beat most, I would hope, beat most G5 schools. I mean, they did lose Georgia Southern, but.
Yeah. I think OU. I think OU's biggest test going forward is going to be Texas, with Texas taking the rights. As much as I love to rag on the University of Texas, I do think, regardless of Alabama having 19 penalties in the first half against them, I think this might be a good thing for Texas. And I'm not going to say Texas is back, but it might be in the right direction for them. But the big test. And it's always a close game between OU and Texas, obviously. There's been some blowouts in the past, of course. But the test is going to be Texas, of course. That's the bottom line. See if OU is going to be, a top 4 team if they can beat Texas.
Here's my deal. I think that Texas game would have been closer. But with Quinn Ewers being out, I think, and potentially Hudson Card, I don't know what that situation is going to look like at that time, but I don't think that game's going to be as tough as you think it is. Because if Quinn Ewers and Hudson Card are not playing for quarterback in that game, I'm really high on Malik Murphy. I think Malik Murphy probably next year might be the best quarterback in that Texas room. But are they going to play him this year? And I don't know, you got to be able to feed those receivers and, Jaleel Billingsley the ball. I don't think that Texas game is going to be as close as everybody thinks it will be this year. Next year, different story. This year, probably, I don't know. Next year might not be the same story because they still got to play Alabama, and Alabama might get the best of them in their quarterbacks again next year. But
Hudson Card is banged up, but Hudson Card I heard, read some articles and stuff that Hudson Card had a better spring and scrimmage when they were inter-squatting. I guess it was possibly pressure from the donors to start Ewers. Ewers, I thought, looked really well against Texas. It sucked that he had to get hurt, but I would not sleep on the fact that Hudson Card could go out there and beat OU.
Hudson Card could go out there and beat OU, but is he going to play in that game? Hudson Card has proven to be injury prone. He's not Sam Ellinger, who was, a little bit more tougher and brute and being able to stay out there. I've heard all that too, but after watching the Alabama game and watching how good Quinn Ewers looked in that game, I do think that the right decision was made for Quinn Ewers to be the starter of the season for Texas. Quinn Ewers looked good in that game. Now, was that just Alabama's secondary looking awful? I don't know. I don't think Alabama's secondary is that bad. But talking about the first test, everybody's saying it in the chat. Kansas State, that's going to be OU's first real test. You've got to be able to, it's at least going to be the first real test for the offense. No, it's going to be a real first test for the offense and the defense, because you've got to be able to go out there and stop Deuce Vaughn, who I actually have as a potential Heisman winner this year. And then K-State's defense is legit. So I actually have Kansas State, and I know you're going to, this is a hot take as I'll get out. I have K-State as a potential dark horse to go make the college football playoffs if they beat OU and Baylor this year.
You're not you have a lot of praise for K-State, and they are a great ball program, gritty, tough, go in there, beat anyone on any given day. But, I mean, we've seen it time after time, and you'll see some teams sneak in. Do you really think that it's really going to change at all this year with the college football playoff with the same 4 teams as it always is?
Man, if you're Kansas State and you go out there and you beat everybody in your conference, you win the Big 12 championship, you're undefeated. And Deuce Vaughn is sitting up there as a Heisman Trophy candidate. They can't leave Kansas State out. Kansas State's a really good team, and a lot of people are overlooking Kansas State this year. I'm not saying they're making the college football playoffs. I'm not saying they're going to beat OU and Baylor. I'm saying if they do, which they have a shot at, I mean, they have a good shot at this thing. So K-State is really good. I know people talk about Bijan Robinson and Mohammed Ibrahim out at Minnesota, but Deuce Vaughn is a dude. And John Nakata said it right there. Deuce Vaughn is the truth. This man's going to put up some yards this year, and he's going to be a nice NFL running back for a lot of teams.
Well, I mean, this goes to John and you, of course. If you think that you guys are going to go out to Dallas into the Red River Rivalry and absolutely boat race Texas, I think that's a little bit of cockiness. I don't even think that's confidence. I think Texas, I mean, it's a close game, and this is the first time I think we've seen Texas perform at this level, especially the way they played against Bama, besides the fact of the 19 penalties that Bama handed them. I don't think that this is going to be an easy win for OU at all.
You know what? We'll just have to agree to disagree there. So, listen, the BV team is not going to give up a 75-yard touchdown pass to start the game for Oklahoma this year in that Texas game. It's just not going to happen. Their first real test.
Are you talking about like what happened last year on the first play of the game against the offense when they took it 75 yards on the bubble?
Yep, it's not going to happen again this year. This Brent Venables defense is going to have these guys ready to play. And again, we talked about it. Kansas State is the first real test, and then you got to go play TCU. So you're going to have a week to make adjustments against another team before you have to go play Texas. That's the big key here is we're not just going to go play Texas and that be our first test. No, like we're going to go play Texas and be able to have a lot of those kinks figured out.
We'll see. I mean, y'all's coach is a defensive mindset. He's more offense, or he's more defense than offense, I would say. This game is probably one of the most unpredictable games always because you just never know who's going to win. I mean, it's a daytime game. It's in a neutral site. Both teams do not like each other at all. And something miraculous happens, like, Jordan Shipley taking 101 yards against OU back in 2008. You have that play you were talking about. I mean, something crazy can always happen in that game. The fact that OU came back last year after what were you down? Like, you guys were down 21, 17?
I think we were down by 28 at one point.
28. I mean, I don't think it's out of the question that anything can happen in this game at all.
I mean, you're right. Anything can happen in the OU Texas game. But the more dominant and more physical team generally wins that game. And I think that's going to be OU. Listen, like, Texas is going to come off a high because they played Bama close, right? That was their championship. They're going to come off a high because they beat Bama close. But, what's going to happen if over the next couple of weeks, especially this week, like UTSA at Texas, like Texas needs to watch out for UTSA. UTSA can sling the ball around. And
that is a good take, Preston.
What happens if you have to play Texas? Like, what happens if Texas plays UTSA really close? What happens? Does Texas now lose that momentum and that confidence going into the Oklahoma game? And so that's going to be the question. And that's something that we haven't seen from Texas in previous years is consistency, right? They'll go out there and they'll play an SEC team like Alabama really close, but then they think they're better than everybody else and they go drop off throughout the rest of the, back half of the season. And they still have to, after UTSA, go to Texas Tech. They have to go to Lubbock, which you can, right now, that's a 2:30 game. you can bet that's going to be a pretty tough game for them. And Donovan Smith's going to give them everything they want. Then they have to play West Virginia at home. West Virginia beat them last year, and West Virginia has a better quarterback this year. So I could make the argument that Texas, by the time they play OU, which, by the way, they don't get a bye week in here. So there's a good chance that Texas could lose some of this momentum. By the time they go to play OU, they're tired, they're worn out. But we can talk more about this game closer to OU Texas, because I would certainly love to have you on with maybe a couple other people and we can debate this one out. So
yeah, I see in the chat John Akata. I did not miss the fact that Bama had 19 penalties in the first half against Texas. So I'm the person that is so hard on Texas football because it's been underperforming ever since they played Bama in the national championship. But my take on the OU Texas, even though we're kind of getting a little off track here, is that is a game that anything can happen and anything goes. That's my take.
Somebody asked me in the chat who I think the starter for Texas will be for the OU Texas game. And I'm going to go ahead and say Hudson Card. But if Hudson Card's not playing well and they just want to see what Malik Murphy looks like, there's a chance Malik Murphy starts that game. And again, I am really high on Malik Murphy. And that might be the best thing for Texas in that game. Because if we haven't seen Malik Murphy up to that point, we have no idea how to game plan for him. And he's a dual threat quarterback. So that could potentially play in Texas's favor in that game. Now, I don't think that's likely to happen. I think Sark's probably going to redshirt Malik this year, and I don't think he's going to see the field at all or very much. So we'll see what Texas is going to put out there for a product. I just want to see Texas be more consistent. I've said this all year long. Texas fans, if all you get this year is just a 7 or 8 win season and you just see better consistency from your team, that's a start. Take that as a win and build from that. So, all right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you have not already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. Go ahead and share this with somebody else. It really helps me out. It helps me bring you guys great content. And until next time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.